Hello everyone and welcome into our final edition of the week here of the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Christopher Shepard. Happy Friday to you all. And as always, we're going to have a great show that's going to be pretty simple today because it's all things Super Bowl 59. Starting off with a preview and going through each and every single segment being about the Super Bowl, whether it's about how the Chiefs got here, how the Eagles got here, some bold predictions I might have, or the unusual streak that the Chiefs can break after 17 years with a win at Sunday night. It should be a fantastic show if you're excited for this year's edition of the Super Bowl. So buckle up. It's going to be a great ride through all these segments. But before we get into any of them and any fun action involving the Super Bowl and discussions about it, I do want to remind you, as always, to like, follow, and subscribe to the show on the network if you haven't done so already and you want to keep up to date with all the content, not just for my show, but for other shows around the network as well. But if you do wish to contribute and interact with our shows a little bit more directly, consider availing yourselves to the Super Chat, Super Things, and Super Stickers features, as well as our website, GSMCpodcast.net, to better interact with the show, get your opinions, feedback, and input on air, and most importantly, just make our shows that much better. You can also leave tips or donations through our website and through these very important Super Chat, Super Sticker, and Super Thanks features as well. It is genuinely appreciated by all concerned here at the network. I know there are a lot of great shows doing their thing. Give them some love as well. But overall, it just makes our shows that much more fun to do when you, our faithful audience, are contributing as well. But without further ado, let's just jump right into our Super Bowl preview, starting off with our literal Super Bowl preview of Super Bowl 59, this Chiefs versus Eagles matchup, a rematch of Super Bowl 57 2 years ago. A very fantastic game. I was actually abroad during that game, and it was a very fun experience for me, experiencing my first Super Bowl abroad. Even though I don't necessarily like both of these teams, they do entertain when they are matched up against each other. But this one has a lot more storylines, unlike the other one, where the Eagles have certain advantageous matchups, and the Chiefs are heading into this more wily than they were 2 years ago, perhaps. More clever, per se, in these situations. So, while this Super Bowl probably will not necessarily produce as many points as, say, the last one, just because I'm looking at both of these defenses, I'm looking at both of these coordinators, I'm looking at both of these head coaches, and I know that this is going to be more of a tactical battle than an offensive shootout, in my opinion. I still think it will come down to several key players making big plays and how the opposing defenses game plan for these dynamic offenses. So without further ado, let's jump right into it, starting off with perhaps the biggest question for any team in this position right now, for either team for that matter. Can the Chiefs slow down Saquon Barkley, and how? Because 2 years ago, it was Miles Sanders and Boston Scott in the backfield for the Philadelphia Eagles. And while Jalen Hurts was fantastic running the football in that game, Saquon Barkley is his get out of jail free card in this one. So perhaps what we're going to see more of from the Eagles are these outside zone or gap running schemes where Saquon Barkley can get downhill in a hurry and get out into the open field in a hurry as well. Because when I think about what the Chiefs are probably going to do and what Spagnuolo has always done in these situations in the postseason is load the box. But this is a different team than that Philadelphia Eagles team 2 years ago offensively. Yes, there are going to be questions about the offensive line's health because both Jurgens and Dickerson are banged up, but I still think that it's more than the sum of their parts, and they're going to lean on their guys in the trenches to match up well against this Chiefs pass rush. And this Chiefs pass rush, while it certainly has dynamic players who can line up anywhere, Chris Jones and George Karlaftis as the primary guys, I do think that the Eagles' offensive line, no matter who's out there, will win the matchups. And it's going to come down to the guards on this team really doing dirty work in the trenches for Saquon to get out in open space. And then combine that now with the way Jalen Hurts scrambles now. Because a couple years ago in that Super Bowl, there were a couple more designed looks, I remember, for Jalen in that game. In this game, there might be a little bit more of an air of unpredictability to how he runs the football. And so, looking at his stats from a couple years ago compared to now, I think it's noteworthy that his numbers, particularly against the blitz, have improved. Because the Chiefs are going to want to try and limit Barkley's abilities in terms of early downs. It's late downs where they feel like they can win. So, looking at how Jalen Hurts' numbers against the blitz in those situations have improved gives me hope that the Eagles in certain moments can win matchups on 3rd and long situations. Because of the fact Jalen Hurts has been more effective against the blitz, has been getting the ball out quicker against the blitz, and has made several critical plays in this year's postseason to prove that he is ready for anything the Chiefs throw at him. So, on the offensive side of things for the Philadelphia Eagles, it's about winning the early downs with Barkley, and it's about, on those 3rd and long situations, should they get there, how Jalen Hurts operates either inside or outside the pocket in terms of his poise. Then, let's talk about this battle of the trenches, because it could come down to this Chiefs defensive line against this Eagles offensive line, and whether or not this Eagles offensive line is up to the task should either Jurgens or Dickerson be absent from it. Because seeing as to how Chris Jones can line up anywhere, and Spagnuolo may want him more and so in the interior to better shore up that run D, then I think that Chris Jones could be a huge X factor in terms of how Spagnuolo uses him, as well as George Karlaftis on the outside if he's given an opportunity to win one-on-one matchups on the edge. So that's going to be an interesting battle, but I do think that for this very moment, as of right now, I'm still taking the Eagles O-line to win this. But then, when we look at other matchups outside of that one matchup, the Chiefs have the most important matchups won. The head coaching and the quarterback. Because Patrick Mahomes in these situations is better than anyone. We'll talk about this in the next segment in terms of how the Chiefs got to this point. Because Patrick Mahomes, and let's talk about this Chiefs offense, is going to really frustrate, I believe, this Eagles defense with one thing and one thing alone. His legs. The Eagles are praying that he doesn't pull up one of those guard tackle counter plays that he did in the championship game against the Bills, where on short yardage downs he was able to make the right decisions, and they both resulted in touchdowns. That 1st and goal early in the game where he handed it off to Kareem Hunt and read the crashing blitzer produced a touchdown. When he pulled it and took it in himself, that was another example of how that play works. And it could frustrate this Eagles team, especially in the red zone. But also, consider the fact that the Chiefs use motion more than 75% of the time. Not just in the regular season, but the playoffs as well. And that's what killed the Eagles' defense in the red zone 2 years ago. The weird motions, the corn dog play, as they call it in Kansas City, that led to 2 touchdowns for Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore, who are not there anymore and have been replaced by much better red zone weapons in DeAndre Hopkins and Xavier Worthy. So that could be a matchup nightmare that the Chiefs can end up winning against this Eagles defense. This Eagles defense is really going to rely on the play of guys in the secondary, because they believe that they can go up against this Chiefs team, whether it be with a too high shell and leaving certain guys like Mitchell and DeJean in man-to-man, or relying on a 4-man rush getting home because of the fact that they can win in the interior parts of the trenches with a guy like Jalen Carter and frustrate Mahomes. And remember, this has been one of the most penalized teams in terms of holding calls in recent years. Jawan Taylor hasn't necessarily been that good at guard positions in terms of how he holds up. And really, there's just been too much movement along this offensive line for me to say that they can handle a front like this. They have some exceptional guys like Trey Smith, Creed Humphrey up front, but I do think that the Eagles will win that battle of the trenches. But when I think about all these different factors, and I think about the head coaching battle, nowhere is it more integral to win a matchup than having the better head coach, because Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo have been here before. And yes, Nick Sirianni was in the same situation 2 years ago, but I don't necessarily know if it comes down to game management, how Nick Sirianni will feel in certain situations. Let's say the Chiefs are down early. The Eagles have built a decent lead. How does he manage that lead? How does the unpredictability of Patrick Mahomes put pressure on you to potentially switch things up offensively? And for that reason, I feel like this head coaching battle is going to become so critical, especially in the final moments. So that's why, in terms of predictions, when it all comes down to who wins at the end of the day, I'm going to have to take the Chiefs until this combination of Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, this nice group of receivers that they now have, Andy Reid, and Steve Spagnuolo consistently lose in the Super Bowl. We haven't seen that. Only Tom Brady, perhaps the greatest quarterback of all time, was the only person to beat Mahomes in a championship game and a Super Bowl, for that matter. And then Joe Burrow, but look what happened to him in the Super Bowl. Ultimately, I have to pick the Chiefs because they give me no reason not to. They are simply winning. And this is a perfect segue into my second segment as we talk about how the Chiefs got to this moment, whether it be through their clever wins, their luck, or just because they have some of the best players at the most important positions in the NFL. Come back right after this short break. We talk about how the Chiefs got here.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me